Lovely movie theater to watch a brief film about the history of Kansas City, the history of J. Rieger and Company, so you can see how those histories overlap. From here, we'll move out to our production floor to learn a little bit about how we make our spirits, and then we'll end with a tasting where you guys will get to try some. Sound good? Mm-hmm. All right, awesome. Any questions before we get started?
In autumn 2014, there was an audible roar from the Midwest. A community was rebuilt. A city was reborn. A celebration was beginning, and spirits were lifted. This is a story of a city, of a family, and of a spirit that cannot be held down.
Before there was a Kansas City, there was the town of Kansa, named for the Native American tribe that laid claim to the land. In 1853, the city as we know it was established. The West Bottoms were vital to Kansas City's early days. Located in close proximity to the confluence of the Missouri and Kansas rivers, the ever-expanding railways led to a boom in business growth in the area, which fueled trade and the distribution of goods and services. Around this time, Jacob Rieger found himself in the middle of Kansas City during its rise.
Jacob Rieger came to America in the late 1870s, early 1880s. From that, he settled in New York very briefly, then made the trek to Circleville, Ohio, which was very common for Jewish people that had that path, and then came to Kansas City at some point in the early to mid 1880s.
In 1878, Kansas City's Union Depot opened near the sprawling stockyards in the drinking and gambling districts of the West Bottoms. Thought by many to be excessive and opulent, Union Depot was soon overwhelmed by the growing railroad traffic connecting Kansas City to other major centers of trade around the country. While Union Depot and other concentrations of traffic developed in Kansas City, Missouri, part of the West Bottoms area developed and grew across the state line in the state of Kansas. This positioned the burgeoning neighborhood to service the people of two states. And while the state of Kansas followed the lead of Carrie Nation and the temperance movement, Missouri did not. In 1881, a full 38 years before it became federal law, the state of Kansas enacted its own statewide prohibition. That meant thirsty drinkers residing in the state of Kansas quickly flooded across the state line into Kansas City, Missouri, looking for a drink. Bars, saloons, and other alcohol-related businesses saturated the West Bottoms, eager to offer hospitality to cowboys fresh off their cattle drives, trappers in town for trade, and to quench the thirst of thousands of people arriving by rail or by river. The abundance of alcohol in the West Bottoms earned the neighborhood the label of the wettest block in the world.
Jacob Rieger and his son Alexander founded J. Rieger & Co. in 1887 on Genesee, right across the street from the Livestock Exchange building down in the West Bottoms. Then in around 1900, Alexander Rieger took over the reins from his father, and he was the one that really took the company to become a national brand. He offered mail order services for his products, which at the time was around 100 different offerings, which is a staggering number. He would send out beautiful advertisements with order forms on the back. People would then mail him money, and then out the door would go the whiskey in various crates. J. Rieger & Co. bottles have been found in states all over the country throughout the years. It was even said that it was the largest mail order whiskey house in the United States with over 250,000 unique customers.
And as J. Rieger & Co. grew, so did the West Bottoms. As the West Bottoms grew, so did Kansas City, reaching a population of over 200,000. On the other side of the city, there was another flourishing industrial area, the East Bottoms. The fertile soil along the river attracted Belgian farmers who had helped settle the area. By the turn of the 20th century, several manufacturing industries had thrived in the neighborhood, and another family laid roots in Kansas City.
The Heim family owned a brewery in East St. Louis. They were immigrants as well from Germany, Austria, and in the mid-1880s, Big Papa Heim sent his two sons to Kansas City to take over a failing brewery that was downtown right near where the Sprint Center sits today. And when they came over and took over that failing brewery, they relocated it and then all of its assets to the East Bottoms neighborhood. where they really started the large-scale western half of the Heim Brewery. Eventually, the East Bottoms brewery that they constructed became so much bigger than the original East St. Louis brewery that they shut down the East St. Louis brewery, relocated all the operations, and now they were across two major rivers, so they had much better access to the western part of the United States.
They grew so large that they built their own glass manufacturing plant, which for a time produced the custom glass whiskey bottles for J. Rieger & Co., forever linking the two companies. In 1901, they built their very own bottling plant. It's the building that you are in right now, and just north of here, the Heims built an amusement park.
And so Electric Park is a fascinating story. It was really the brainchild of Michael Heim, which was Ferdinand's son, and it was one of the first electrically powered amusement parks in the country, and it was really built as a means to attract more people down to the neighborhood because they had invested in their own streetcar line. They had built a streetcar line down to that neighborhood just to get their family and employees down there to work, and then thought, well, let's add on to that by building an amusement park.
There were a handful of rides, water fountain, bandstand, theater, and beer garden. It was something that drew people not just from Kansas City, but from all over the Midwest, making that original, what they called and dubbed the Heim line, the train line that came down there. It made it one of the most profitable train lines in the entire city.
Due to its popularity, the Heims relocated Electric Park to a neighborhood further south, where it entertained even more patrons, including Kansas City's very own Walt Disney. Heading into the 20th century, Kansas City was booming. In the spring of 1903, however, the course of Kansas City changed forever. The banks of the Missouri River overflowed on historic levels, leaving many dead, even more homeless, and bringing transportation and services to a halt. It was a devastating blow to the entire city, and especially to the industrial areas of both the East and West Bottoms. The flood was so extreme that it not only altered the physical geography of the river, but also caused business owners and city leaders to look to relocate to higher ground. The focus of development shifted from the West Bottoms to land just south of downtown. The transition of progress peaked in 1914 when Union Depot officially closed, and Union Station opened its doors on October 30th of the same year. Still, to this day, Union Station remains the second largest train depot in the United States.
There were a lot of businessmen in Kansas City that bought land just to the north of where Union Station was going to be going in. When they did that, Alexander Rieger was one of those first individuals. He bought a plot of land right at the northwest corner of 20th and Main Street and began constructing and finished shortly after Union Station opened what was dubbed as the Rieger Hotel. And the Rieger Hotel was a traveler's hotel for traveling salesmen, but what it really was for Alexander was an advertising arm for J. Rieger. The entire south wall was a brick wall so that he could paint a 3-story whiskey bottle on the side so that when people's first impression of coming into Kansas City, whether they walked across the bridge right there or they came across the original streetcar line, they had to see this 3-story bottle of whiskey so that when people come to Kansas City, they know that Kansas City is J. Rieger & Co. and they know that J. Rieger & Co. is Kansas City.
In 1915, Jacob Rieger passed, and in less than 5 years, Congress signed into law the 18th Amendment, ushering the entire United States into Prohibition. By 1922, Alexander had shut down J. Rieger & Co., sold the hotel, and let the trademark formally expire. On the other side of the city, despite their financial stability and forward-thinking strategies, the Heim Brewery had no way to weather the Prohibition era. In 1924, the bottling plant where you are now was sold to the Independent Alcohol Sales Company, where commercial-grade alcohol was produced. By the end of Prohibition in 1933, there was no trace of J. Rieger & Co. or the Heim Brewery. It seemed that the legacies of two prominent Kansas City families had all but disappeared. But that was not the case. In 2010, the idea for bringing back the historic distillery was dreamed up by Ryan Mabey, a Kansas City bartender who opened his own bar, Manifesto, in the basement of the original Rieger Hotel. Fascinated by the history of the hotel, Ryan became more and more intrigued by its connection to the distillery. Later that year, Ryan expanded his venture to include a restaurant in what was the original hotel lobby. On opening night, Andy Rieger, who was at the time the only living Rieger of Jacob's bloodline, walked in to meet the owners and thanked them for honoring his family's name through their restaurant.
that was when I threw out the idea to him to, we should partner and bring back the rieger brand.
After 4 years of hard work, research, and product formulation, Ryan and Andy successfully relaunched J. Rieger & Co. with the release of Kansas City Whiskey. Shortly thereafter, head distiller Nathan Perry joined the team and distilled the first whiskey in Kansas City since Prohibition.
In 2014, the Kansas City Royals made the World Series for the first time in almost 30 years. The city experienced a civic pride that had mellowed for generations, and J. Rieger & Co. was resurrected, distilling spirits in Kansas City again for the first time since Prohibition in the historic East Bottoms. A celebration was beginning, and spirits were lifting. This is the story of a city, of a family, and of a spirit that could not be held down.